December 30th, 1976, and my name is Jesse Alexander. I'm a ham radio operator, and to me it's the greatest hobby in the world.
How did I get started? Well, that's a long story, but I'll try to make it short. I got started in ham radio because honestly, none of the people that I knew were involved in ham radio. My parents didn't know I was, uh, uh, didn't know what ham radio was. And so I kind of got started because I thought it was going to be kind of cool to be unique and that kind of thing. It turns out I found a large, relatively large community. I think there are about 250,000 hams in ham radio in the United States. And I was able to connect with some of them and get started. Actually, the first thing I did that was sort of ham radio-ish was I used to read QST magazine in Montclair Public Library. And I was just so excited by all the stories in there that I decided to get a radio. My first radio was a shortwave receiver that my dad helped me buy. We actually got it at a pawn shop in Newark. I'll never forget that, going down to downtown Newark and getting the radio. I still have it somewhere in my closet somewhere. But anyway, I now once I got the receiver, I was able to go and listen to ham radio operators communicate. I was able to listen to some of the freaky number stations, the spy stations that would send a series of letters in Morse code, or in some cases, there's a voice of a child or a human, another human being saying characters and numbers and all kinds of freaky stuff. So there was so many things to listen to back in the 70s on ham radio, on just shortwave radio in general. So I got really excited about that and then decided to get licensed as a ham radio operator. I should say that I bought my first transmitter. It's a Heathkit DX60B from Heathkit. My mother gave me the money to buy that, and my dad helped me set up an antenna. And there's a long story about that antenna being up more than 30 years. In fact, the people who purchased the house that I grew up in, I actually ran into one of the people. She was a postal worker. I ran into her at the post office, and she asked me about the antenna, and I told her that my dad put it up. Dad and I put it up, and that yes, she could take it down. It's been up forever, but she could take it down now. And I just thought that was she thought that was kind of funny that it was up there so long. But and then over the years, as I got involved through my father, I met I think he was a judge in one of the first black judges in uh, New Jersey in one of the major courts there. I don't have his name or his call sign, unfortunately, but he was the first black ham I met. And he told me about the OMIC organization of African American ham radio operators. And I signed up way back then in the 1970s. And I haven't really looked back. I've been licensed, all continuously licensed since 1975. I've upgraded while I was in college to general, and that was interesting. And also, eventually after 9/11, I upgraded to extra. So you can read all about my story on my LinkedIn page, or actually on my QRZ page. And it just gives you all the details. But that's basically how I got started. And like I said, I haven't looked back. I've been having an absolute blast with this really cool, geeky, nerdy hobby. Thanks for asking. Oh, how did I get this particular job? Oh, well, that's kind of a joke. Actually a joke with myself. I used to tell friends that my ideal job would be number one, to be a drink inspector in Hawaii. And the other ideal job that I would love to have is when somebody would pay me to be a ham radio operator. Who would pay me to be a ham radio operator? And so I thought that was kind of a joke because I love ham radio so much. Well, so I decided to test this out, you know. So I actually created a search on LinkedIn called ham radio. It's still up there. And this particular job that I'm doing now popped up. And it was funny. I was like, this is perfect. So I applied, and like they say, the rest is history. But the other thing I learned by this exercise is that there are a whole lot of jobs that or a lot of companies and that are looking for people with practical radio experience and practical electronic experience and practical understandings of how uh, radio frequencies work and the electromagnetic spectrum works, especially for radio. And they're just quite a few jobs. They can't just come out and say they want only ham radio operators, but they do say that they prefer people who have ham radio licenses to be on their team. So, and actually, in a lot of ways, I should not have been surprised by that because I worked at Bell Labs for years. I worked on the first cell site cellular system, and it's called AMPS, Advanced Mobile Phone Service, back in the 80s. And my supervisor was a ham. My coworkers were hams. I believe that the head of our department was also a ham radio operator. So, and there was a running joke that uh, you needed a ham license to work in our organization. So, yes, having a license is an advantage for people looking for work in particular fields, whether you are planning to be a mechanic or what we call part of the craft, where you're actually working with radio frequency equipment and building it physically, or whether you're on the R&D side, where you're trying to understand parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, you know, like you're an astrophysicist or a radio astronomer, or if you're a person who's actually building circuits for amateur for radio stuff or Wi-Fi or cellular or even car remotes that are that use part of the spectrum, or TV remotes, they all use part of the electromagnetic spectrum. So I guess it really shouldn't have been a surprise to me that employers are looking for people with ham radio licenses, or prefer to hire people who have ham radio licenses. But you know, I got this job basically as a joke with myself and that kind of thing. So that's my very long answer to your very short question. Thank you so much for asking. Well, yeah, just like in real life, there is discrimination in ham radio as well. I've faced it at ham fests. I've faced it recently at a conference where someone wanted to challenge whether or not I was supposed to be there. Uh, it's kind of weird being the only Black person in the room when there's a ham radio event or something like that. Um, and the way I've dealt with it is that I should say that I've got a few years on me, and I've got a lot of support, including psychological support from friends and from people in the mental health profession. I also have some spiritual guides and others who help fortify me and strengthen me and help me know that, look, I belong on this planet. And yes, I am a black ham radio operator. And if you have a problem with that, too bad. So I have a lot of support from my beautiful wife, Carol Henry Alexander, an artist and visual artist extraordinaire, and folks from my church and that kind of thing. And I think it's very important for young people to build, I call it a pyramid, that supports them, people that they can turn to. I'm also in the Mike Amateur Radio Organization, which is an organization of predominantly of African American amateur radio operators, and that helps too. They actually have a great Sunday net that's been going on for years, decades actually, and they also have a Zoom line where anyone can go in and ask a question. And so and also talk all kinds of crazy stuff about ham radio and also pass jokes and also learn that you're not alone. You really aren't alone. It may feel like you're alone in many instances, but there are a whole bunch of people who support you. So what I learned over the years is if you win and if you face discrimination, turn to your friends, turn to your advisors, talk with your teachers, your professors, and that kind of thing. And that has helped me over the years. And it still helps me because I still face discrimination on and off the air. So that's my long answer to your short question. Thanks for asking. What do ham radio operators do? Oh gosh, we just do all kinds of geeky stuff. Um, for fun, I've been playing around with some of the recently developed digital communications techniques, including digital mobile radio, DMR, and FT8 on HF. And I'm really excited about the some of the open source projects. Uh, I just found out a little bit more about the M17 project, which will build open source radios and that kind of thing. And I'm really, really stoked about that. That's sort of the fun side. Oh, I should also say that I'm relearning and repracticing Morse code because I just like playing around with Morse code. Uh, I think I've mentioned this before, but uh, black ham radio operators, especially back in the day, faced a lot of discrimination. And frankly, other hams wouldn't communicate with us by voice if they thought we had a quote black accent. Right? So a lot of us became proficient in Morse code or CW, and including yours truly. I at one point in my career was copying and was sending and receiving Morse code at 21 words per minute. So the cool thing about CW was, especially back in the day, that people couldn't tell whether you were black. So they were just happy to have the contact. So I'd like to restart my the fun times with Morse code, and so I'm getting back into that. And sort of the serious sides of ham radio is the public service side. So I've been involved with Prince George's County Amateur Radio Emergency Service, Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service, and supporting the local hospitals just in case during a mass casualty situation, which would most likely be a weather event, but there are also terrorist attacks like on 9/11 and January 6th last year. Uh, uh, these are circumstances where it might be good to have communications when all else fails, when the cell phones go down or get clogged up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I've also been working with the Community Emergency Response Team, CERT, which is a FEMA program. And there are a lot of ham radio operators involved with that. And the purpose of CERT is to help, basically help your community, the people on your block. If, again, some kind of major event happens, usually most likely a weather situation, and there's flooding or something else like that, CERT gives you training to help your neighbors until the first responders can respond. So that's one of the things that I do. The other thing I do, which I think is a lot of fun, is Skywarn. Skywarn basically is a National Weather Service program where you're trained to report things that the weather satellites can't see. For example, if there's a major thunderstorm and the thunderstorm is actually throwing hail, you can tell the people in the National Weather Service through Skywarn how big the hail is. And we use currency or quarters, dimes, pennies, nickels, half dollars, and that kind of thing to say how big the hail is. We also describe, we also train to describe how big branches and trees that fall and pass that information through ham radio to the National Weather Service. And that's important to them because it tells them how strong the winds were. We also report other things that happen, like funnel clouds. That could be an indicator of a tornado. So if you ever listen to National Weather, the National Weather Service radio, you may have heard something at the end of the report where it says something about spotters have reported a funnel cloud or something else, or the depth of snow being so many inches and that kind of thing. Those spotters are Skywarn trained people. So I happen to be one of those. I really had a lot of fun in Skywarn, still do. My class actually had people who were 8 years old and all the way up to people who were retired, who were in their 80s. You don't have to be a ham radio operator to be a Skywarn volunteer, but it sure helps. You can be a Skywarn spotter with just your regular telephone and just call the National Weather Service. They give you the special number. They also give you a Skywarn designation number, and mine happens to be PG 116, and or as we say in ham radio, Papa Golf 116. And I would report, I could call in and to the National Weather Service and say, this is PG 116 and I'm seeing a funnel cloud and it's heading this way. I'm going to run or something like that. And the National Weather Service would confirm that with their weather radar and their weather satellites, and then report it over their radios, over their broadcast radios to everyone who can listen, and that kind of thing. So those are the kinds of things that I do with ham radio. Thanks for asking.